Hey there, Square Enix. I got my eye on you, and I think I got you figured out. I think I've wrapped my head around what you're all about, you know? I think you're a couple cowards. I think you're a couple weak-minded wussies that can't remake Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VI is arguably the greatest RPG of all time. Second probably only to Chrono Trigger, as I've mentioned many times in the past. However, for a game of such high acclaim, Final Fantasy VI has almost never been re-released. In fact, the only version we've gotten of it that's been updated in any way, unless you count the egregious mobile port that smoothed all the pixels over, was the pixel remaster we got just recently. Look, it's even causing my dog to do all Lion King shit over here. But Final Fantasy VI is truly a special game. Can't take this seriously. But Final Fantasy VI is truly a special game. It is a story like no other in the gaming industry. And it truly has such an incredible pacing, such an amazing combat system, with such likable characters that are truly believable as characters for, a game on the Super Nintendo. Not to mention, visually, the game is a technical marvel on the Super Nintendo. And even today, I'd argue the original Super Nintendo version holds up the best out of any other version that's out there. Especially the Pixel Remaster. For as much as I do love the Pixel Remasters, and with how much time and effort they obviously put into the version of Final Fantasy VI for that collection, I'd argue it looks probably the worst out of any game on that collection, especially when you go into the overworld in Final Fantasy VI on the Pixel Remaster. The colors are just way too bright and saturated, and it really ruins that tone that the original game was going for. But how can gamers of today know the beauty that is Final Fantasy VI when getting a copy in its authentic state is so damn hard? And yes, I do know we have the Pixel Remaster. Square, I know you're saying we gave you the Pixel Remaster, and we even gave you some HD 2D cutscenes, but you know what? Hooey to that. The Pixel Remaster is not the version of Final Fantasy VI that I and so many others wanted. Yes, it is a version, and that is slightly acceptable, but certain things about it are just not ideal, such as the character sprites in Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, at least to me, seem much less detailed, much less authentic to that original version. I already mentioned the color correction issues, and this is not just on the overworld. No, in even the towns itself, some areas look amazing. Some areas look exactly how I remember them, or sometimes even better. But some areas just seem way too bright and a completely different shift in tone that I don't think fits the game nearly as well. However, Square Enix pulled a very sneaky move on us when they decided to release this game right here, Dragon Quest III HD 2D. Look at how beautiful that box art is. Look at how beautiful that box is. But the game looks amazing. It really is graphically a marvel to behold. And it transforms Dragon Quest III into a completely new experience that really has so much charm and adds to the original. And yes, they didn't completely remake this game in 3D graphics. They remade it, I'd argue, in a much more unique and even genuine way to the original. It still has that charm that the pixel art version originally had. It just is brought into a new modern era. And after playing Dragon Quest III HD 2D, I immediately was outraged. Every single screen, every dungeon, every town I entered, all I could see in my mind was, what if Final Fantasy VI looked this way? And I gotta say, folks, I need the game. I need it now. I don't know if Square Enix has it on their radar. I don't know if they want to make it, if they already are making it. But what I'm saying to you, Square Enix, remake Final Fantasy VI in HD 2D, or we're gonna have some issues, man. It would be a banger. Many people in Square Enix have already been on record discussing the potential of a Final Fantasy VI remake. I believe what Square said last time is a project such as Final Fantasy VI to be remade in the fashion that Final Fantasy VII would be remade would be a 20-year project, which how long Final Fantasy VII remake has gone on, that's very believable. And I believe Square's words were, whereas something like Final Fantasy VII is a guaranteed success for them and they'll see a return on a 20-year-long development time, Final Fantasy VI, for as acclaimed as that game is, they don't know if commercially it will be a smash hit success to justify remaking the whole thing. And I don't know what development costs are for an HD 2D game. I'm sure it's not, as cheap as many people make it out to be. There's still work that goes into it. Look how long Dragon Quest III HD 2D came to come to fruition, but I can't imagine it's nearly as resource heavy or, costly to develop a game like Final Fantasy VI HD 2D as it would be to do a full-scale remake akin to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And many people have even gone on record to say they would like to see a Final Fantasy VI HD 2D. Even the producer of Dragon Quest III HD 2D said his next game, he'd be super down to making Final Fantasy VI HD 2D. So Square, baby, buddy, let's see it happen. Let's see that game. Let's see that game be made. Let's see that game be made. I love Final Fantasy VI, and I think the world would love Final Fantasy VI if they just got a chance to see it in a modern light. And I think the Pixel remaster, for as good as it is, and yes, for preservation's sake, it is a version of that original Final Fantasy VI experience. But I think in the modern age, a lot of younger, players and just people in general look upon older pixel-based games and definitely feel a sense of, oh wow, that's aged. And there's definitely a bigger audience for retro, pixel art games nowadays, but the majority of people, I think, still see pixel-based games and turned an eye to it. They say, oh, that shouldn't, whether it's even something like it doesn't cost full price, it shouldn't be full price for a pixel art game, or anything like that. There's just a dismissive property to seeing a game that looks in that retro style. Whereas I didn't hear anything of that for Dragon Quest III HD 2D, partly because it looks so amazing. It looks up to modern standards. And I'm not a graphics whore or anything like that, but I just think giving Final Fantasy VI the HD 2D treatment would be such an amazing way to bring this classic into the modern era. And I'm not going to lie, while I'm not a graphics whore, yeah, I salivate at the mouth for what Final Fantasy VI HD 2D would look like. And in the Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster, the scenes such as the opera scene, are remade in an HD 2D remake style. And as amazing as those scenes are, they just piss you off more. There's been entire articles written about this. You see that scene, you see what you could have, and it looks amazing. There's voice acting with the opera song itself. And it's such an amazing experience. And then you cut back to the normal pixel remaster, look, and it's like a slap in the face. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a critique. It's amazing they even included some of those HD 2D remake cutscenes at all. They didn't have to do that. But it just further bothers me. Because I'm like, I want this, and we could have it. So where is it? A remake of Final Fantasy VI is something that many fans, including myself, have wanted for a very, very, very long time. And I don't anticipate a full 3D remake for the reasons I've already mentioned, but also I don't want a full 3D remake. The producer of the Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake said at first they were considering doing a 3D remake, and I believe it would be akin to something like the Link's Awakening remake they did. It's still that original perspective, but it's just 3D models. And even if they did something like that with Final Fantasy VI, I don't think I'd like that. After playing Octopath Traveler, after playing Triangle Strategy, Dragon Quest III HD 2D, and right off the bat, I think Dragon Quest HD 2D Remake is the best looking of the HD 2D game style. That is really how I would like to see not only Final Fantasy VI done, but, Final Fantasy 1 through 6, Dragon Quest 1 through 6, I'd love to, Chrono Trigger, oh my god, there's a YouTuber out there, and his whole shtick is he will remake these classic games in an HD 2D style, and my god, he did Pokemon, and I'll link his channel, I won't show his work off, because I don't know if he'd even want that, but it's truly amazing what this style is capable of, and how amazingly, it can recreate some of these classic games that we hold very dear. My biggest wish, you know, the game I want more than anything in the world is Final Fantasy VI HD 2D. I'll buy 20 copies. I'll buy 40 copies. I don't give a shit. Just remake the game and people will be there. I promise you. It is one of the highest rated RPGs of all time. Like I said, I think it's either #1 or at the very least #2 of the greatest RPG of all time. Second only to Chrono Trigger, which you should also remake in an HD 2D style, but one thing at a time. One thing at a time for now, of course. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I just want Final Fantasy VI HD 2D. So, and my dog does too. That's why he joined me for this one, because he's very mad at you too, Square. So if you don't remake Final Fantasy VI in an HD 2D style, not only are you upsetting me, you're upsetting my dog. So have that on your conscience, you fucking bastards. Later.